Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Noted and notorious infamous promoter Don King is at it again, trying to pull a bait and switch on Mahmoud Charr, trying to get the WBA to either strip him or make him a champion in recess. But there's a plot twist here, because at the same time, Mahmoud Charr has been confirmed to travel to America for the so-called fight against Trevor Bryan on January the 29th, which is allegedly happening in Florida. And I say allegedly because BoxingScene.com is still reporting that the Hard Rock, where this is meant to take place, says there is no booking for a fight this Friday in any venue, nothing on site with them. So what I'll do is I'll get through these pieces of news, because this still feels like some sort of high-stakes game of chicken, that they're waiting for something to fall over here with either side and then sort of say, look, we did our bit, give me the title, call me the full champion, strip the other guy. This is really what it does feel like, because there's been all sorts of shenanigans, and this latest news, it is just another chapter in it. But at the back end of the video, I'll quickly comment on two fights, because we could see one or the other fight this weekend, one being Bryan and Charr, obviously, but the other being Bermane Stiverne, because he potentially could be drafted in. And when Christopher Lovejoy claimed that he wasn't fighting Bermane Stiverne, had never seen a contract or signed a contract, and now with this whole news of Mahmoud Charr, it's become pretty obvious what the play is, but we'll get to that. So starting with some news that came out on Twitter. This is as I woke up, so I wasn't able to get to it immediately, but Dan Raphael saying, Don King has petitioned the hashtag wretched WBA to make Mahmoud Charr its recess heavyweight titleist, or to strip him and approve Trevor Bryan and versus Bermane Stiverne for the vacant regular title on Friday's supposed card, even though Charr has visa and says he arrives in the US on Tuesday. And around about the same time, possibly a little bit earlier actually, you had Jake Donovan of BoxingScene.com tweeting, Mahmouh Charr is prepared to arrive in South Florida by Tuesday after being cleared for travel visa. Expectation is a fight with Trevor Bryan or his due split from the $2 million for which Don King remains on the hook. And that is the purse, $2 million pot for this fight. Mahmoud Charr is entitled to 1.5 million of it. So clearly he's either coming for the bag or the fight and the bag, or maybe he'll just leave if they do fight with the bag, because I expect he probably gets beaten, but we'll come to that. So anyway, the story that Jake Donovan, there's two things that I wanted to just quickly get over here. He says, in the official petition, a copy of which has been obtained by BoxingScene.com, King called for the WBA to sanction the bout between Bryan and Bermane Stiverne for the WBA World Heavyweight Championship, while placing Mahmoud Charr as champion in recess for his unavailability, or in the alternative, removing his designation as world champion. So there it is. You have the bait and switch that Don King is trying to pull here. And I'd said in some recent videos, some heavyweight news mashup videos where I'd been sort of touching on some of this stuff, it was starting to look like Don King was trying to set up Bermane Stiverne versus Trevor Bryan, cut Mahmoud Charr out of the picture. All these things that have been going on with apparently no hotel booked, no venue booked, all these other things, these bits and pieces that should be tidied up and obviously pretty clear to the opponent who's meant to be traveling to the location. And because Don King's meant to be providing these things and, you know, as an advance on Mahmoud Charr's purse, etc. But this whole thing has been a complete mess, and it has looked like it's been dodgy from the beginning, and it's clear that it's some sort of bait and switch operation. But Mahmoud Charr is calling the bluff, and I'd said that in a recent video, just call the bluff. Just call the bluff, because, you know, you turn up. If the fight's not on, well, you're going to get your purse. And probably Trevor Bryan gets stripped if there is no official event. But perhaps this thing is being kept under wraps in terms of the venue and all the other bits and pieces associated with it. Perhaps it's going to be moved at the last second, or so-called moved, inverted commas, to some sort of other location which they've, been preparing for in advance. trying to make as much sort of dodginess and, smoke and mirrors and make it appear that it's happening but not happening, and cast enough doubt to get Charr out of the picture, stripped or whatever, just not coming. But Charr has called the bluff. So that's good, because we want to see these two guys fight. And if this card is in fact happening, at least one of these guys who hasn't been active, Trevor Bryan for over 2.5 years, Mahmoud Charr for over 3 years, one of them is going to get beaten and will be out of the picture. And we don't have to call them a so-called belt holder or champion, as some people do. But it is good that Charr is going to be coming. And this whole thing with Bermane Stiverne, I mean, the way I look at this fight, and this is where I'll get into, Trevor Bryan, if this fight actually happens with Stiverne, which clearly King wants, it kind of is, because you look at Bryan's record, it's atrocious. Before he fought BJ Flores, he'd fought 3 guys who had collective losses of over 70 losses combined. And that's pretty dreadful stuff to be going into a so-called, title fight, which I might add, Don King petitioned in the week of the fight to get on the line. And what happened in that scenario back in 2018 was he claimed that there was some, legal issues with Fraser Kendo and Mahmoud Charr that would prohibit them from fighting. That both their lawyers for those camps, Kendo and also Charr, disputed that. But the WBA, despite all of that, put a title on the line. And seemingly King is trying to get the same thing to happen again, that the title will be on the line if Charr isn't there and Stiverne is going to be the guy stepping in. And I would note, Bermane Stiverne is not ranked. So how it could happen in the first place is beyond me. But obviously Don King still knows where whatever bodies are buried in the WBA, he still has some pull and some sway. Clearly has got some nudes or something that, he's got over some of the management at the sanctioning body. Because the guy is still pulling the strings at close to 90 years old. And it really is beyond a joke, because, he's not guiding fighters to any meaningful sort of fights, no meaningful careers of sort of note recently. And you look at the way that he's sort of handled Bryan, who's been sitting on the sidelines waiting for a fight and just not getting it. But anyway, the way I look at that fight, if that was to occur, is effectively consider it like Joe Joyce versus Bermane Stiverne. So at the time, Joyce was 8-9-0, something like that, and there was a WBA gold title put up for that. But it was effectively against a sort of faded husk of a husk in Stiverne, who's somewhat durable, may be able to go some rounds, and he was able to get the win there, but really there was no real risk posed by Bermane Stiverne. And that's the way I feel about Stiverne versus Bryan. Effectively, even though Trevor Bryan's record is, bloated and, 19-0, 20-0, whatever it is, he is still, in some sense, a prospect, because he hasn't really had those sort of incremental step-ups like he should have. So this is kind of like one of those sort of fights like Joyce had against Stiverne, but when Joyce had, less than half the fights. That's the way I see it. Stiverne will come in, he will get tagged up, probably beaten up, probably, hurt to some degree, because Bryan can punch. And remembering that performance against Joyce was a couple of years ago, Stiverne didn't look that great, and he wouldn't have got any better. And who can forget him getting iced by Deontay Wilder in one round, 3 or 4 years ago now? So I think that if that fight happens, it's an easy win for Trevor Bryan. He can probably do pretty much what he wants in there, because Bermane Stiverne at this point is pretty flat-footed, doesn't really have too much pop. He's got halfway decent chin, has been cracked before by the likes of Deontay Wilder, but we'll get to see some development by Trevor Bryan, because this is sort of what it is, a development fight. It's not a title fight, it's more like a prospect-level fight. But if the fight with Charr happens, I think that Trevor Bryan's going to win that too. I know people look at Trevor Bryan's record and go, there's not a lot there. But you have to look at Mahmouh Charr. He's just not very good. He never was that good. And Trevor Bryan, from what I've seen of him, actually does have a bit of talent. And I think he can take care of an inactive guy who was never that good in the first place, who's knocked out by a cruiserweight, and Myris Bradis has been stopped a number of times and didn't really look that good in that so-called title fight over 3 years ago in 2017. The inactivity is going to be a killer for him, and I hope he gets beaten in some sense, because he's been parading around like he's the best thing since sliced bread, and clearly he's been somewhat of a fraud not fighting. But both these guys can put it on the line, prove themselves. But this whole thing, It's been a fast from, the get-go. Don King needs to get out of boxing. And you know what, though? I'm a madman, so I'm going to end up buying this pay-per-view because I need to cover it for the channel. But I am not going to buy it until the very, last possible minute, just because I'm not sure that this thing's going to happen. If I buy it now, and here's actually something from the website, it is actually, look at this. This promo poster looks like someone who's had about 10 minutes of some graphic design lessons. It's pretty rudimentary stuff. This is their paywall. And yeah, look at it. So I'm not confident this thing is going ahead. I'm not going to buy it right until the last second. As it is, there's 2 fights, and then they're filling it out with some fights from the 70s and 80s, classics as they call it. Great fights, but for a card that you're paying $20 for, you want to be able to have a decent card, a decent undercard. Because this main event's not that great to begin with. So yeah, make of it what you will. But I'll conclude my somewhat news/rant here. We'll call stumps, but it hasn't surprised me. Don King trying to pull a bait and switch. It's some high-level stakes game of chicken. Who's going to pull out first to blame the other? And is this event really going to happen? Because as Boxing Scene reports, the venue that it's so-called meant to be happening at is not booked at the time that tweet went out. And it is Fight Week. Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.